The office was always busy, filled with the sound of keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and people talking. Among the employees, one person quietly stood out not because of anything flashy, but because of the way they worked. This employee had special needs, and every day they came to work with a determination that was rare. They focused hard, did their tasks carefully, and always tried to help others whenever possible, but not everyone appreciated the effort. Some coworkers didn't understand the challenges this employee faced, and instead of being supportive, they often made jokes or said mean things. At first, the employee tried to ignore it, thinking that maybe the teasing would stop if they didn't react. They smiled politely and continued working, even when the words stung. It wasn't just small jokes. Sometimes the employee was blamed for mistakes they didn't make. Other times, coworkers would whisper behind their back, rolling their eyes or laughing when the employee struggled with a task that was hard for them. Even though the employee wanted to speak up, they feared making the situation worse. The office, which should have been a place of learning and growth, felt more like a place of tension and anxiety. Despite all this, the employee never stopped trying. Every morning, they arrived on time, ready to give their best. They kept their head down, focused on their work, and quietly celebrated small victories like completing a report on time or helping a colleague with a problem. These little successes were precious, but they often went unnoticed. The employee's heart was heavy, but they had a spark inside them that refused to die out. They dreamed of being respected for who they were, not ridiculed. They imagined a day when coworkers would see their effort and dedication rather than their differences. But right now, that seemed far away. Even in the most difficult moments, the employee showed kindness. If someone dropped a stack of papers, they helped pick it up. If a colleague was struggling with a project, they offered a helping hand. Their patience and gentle nature didn't go unnoticed by everyone. Some people admired it quietly, but the harshness of others often overshadowed it. Every day felt like a challenge. The employee wondered if anyone would ever truly see them. They wished for someone who could understand, someone who would stand up for them when no one else would. And little did they know that day was closer than they thought. On one particular morning, the office was busier than usual. People were rushing around, phones ringing nonstop, and the air was filled with tension. The employees sat at their desk, quietly trying to finish their work. They heard whispers from the corner of the room and felt the familiar knot in their stomach. A few coworkers were laughing at something, pointing in their direction. The employee looked down at their hands, taking a deep breath, trying to calm their nerves. It was a moment of silent courage. Despite the fear, despite the embarrassment, the employee continued working. Every keystroke, every completed task was a small act of resistance. They refused to let the cruelty of others define them. Each day they showed up, worked hard, and tried to be kind. Even when the world around them was harsh. That morning, something unusual happened. Among the busy office crowd, someone new walked in, a person who would notice things others ignored. Someone who had the reputation of being calm, kind, and respected by many. Their presence changed the energy in the room, though no one realized it yet. This person didn't come to judge or to criticize. They came with eyes that could see beyond appearances. Someone who might finally notice the employee's quiet courage. For the first time in a long time, the employee felt a tiny flicker of hope. They didn't know it yet, but this day would mark the beginning of a change that would not only affect their life, but the lives of everyone in that office. And so, they continued working, their focus sharp, their determination quiet but strong, unaware that their perseverance was about to meet someone who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. That day, the office felt different. People were moving quickly, trying to finish tasks before the day ended, but there was an unusual energy in the air. Among the crowd of employees, one person noticed something that most others ignored. This visitor had a calm presence, the kind of person who didn't just glance at things, they truly saw what was happening around them. As they walked through the office, they noticed the employee with special needs sitting quietly at their desk. The employee's hands moved steadily over the keyboard, focused on completing their tasks despite the whispers and sideways glances from some coworkers. There was a tension around the employee that day, a mixture of fear, determination, and exhaustion. It was subtle, but anyone who paid attention could see it. The visitor, known for their kindness and respect toward others, paused for a moment. They observed how the employee worked so carefully, how they tried to do everything perfectly despite the challenges they faced. It was clear that this person put their heart into their work, even if others didn't recognize it. As they continued walking, the visitor noticed the small moments of cruelty. A few employees were smirking, whispering to each other, and pointing toward the employee's desk. Some even made quiet jokes at their expense. The employee, trying to stay strong, didn't look up. They focused on their work, keeping their head down, their hands moving steadily. But the sadness and discomfort were visible. The visitor felt a pang of empathy. They understood immediately that this wasn't just about one person struggling with tasks. It was about respect, dignity, and humanity. It wasn't fair that someone who worked so hard and tried so sincerely had to face this kind of treatment. It wasn't right that they had to hide their feelings or shrink in order to survive the day. Without making a scene. The visitor started observing more closely. They saw the little ways the employee tried to cope, small breaths, a moment of hesitation before answering a question, a quiet nod when someone offered help, or the way they smiled politely even when hurtful words were directed at them. Every detail spoke of patience and courage. Some of the coworkers didn't notice. They thought everything was normal, that it was fine to tease or criticize. But the visitor noticed. They realized that this was a situation that required attention, not silence. Standing in that office, watching the way the employee continued to give their best despite the challenges, the visitor felt a strong urge to act. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about making sure that people who tried hard and gave their best were not treated unfairly. The visitor had seen many things in life, but this quiet struggle, the courage of someone who kept going despite constant mistreatment, touched. Then deeply. The visitor watched as a coworker leaned over to point out a mistake that the employee hadn't actually made. A few snickers followed. The employee froze for a moment, unsure whether to respond or to stay silent. Their heart raced, but they chose to keep working, hoping to finish the task without drawing more attention. It was a small act of bravery, but it was all they could do in that moment. At that point, the visitor made a decision. They wouldn't just watch. They couldn't let this continue without speaking up. They quietly moved closer, observing not just the employee, but also the coworkers whose behavior was harmful. They wanted to understand the situation fully, to see what was really happening, so that any action they took would be fair and effective. The visitor noticed the kindness in the employee too. Despite the way some people treated them, the employees still helped where they could. If a piece of paper fell, they picked it up. If someone needed assistance, they offered it. Their small acts of generosity didn't go unnoticed by the visitor, who recognized that this was someone with a big heart, someone who deserved respect and support. Not ridiculed. As the visitor continued observing, they realized that this moment, this ordinary day in the office, had become extraordinary. It was no longer just about routine work or office politics. It was about standing up for someone who deserved dignity. It was about noticing courage when most people chose to ignore it. And so, the visitor decided that they would not stay silent. They would find a way to make the employee feel seen and valued. They would show the office that mistreatment and cruelty were unacceptable. It wasn't going to be an easy task. There were many people who had grown comfortable with ignoring the problem, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, the employee continued their work, unaware that someone had truly noticed their struggle for the first time. They didn't know that help, understanding, and support were about to enter their life in a way they had never experienced before. They were focused on doing their job, quietly wishing that one day someone would recognize their effort and treat them with the respect they deserved. That morning became a turning point. Though the employee didn't know it yet, the visitor, with a calm but determined presence, watched carefully, ready to step in at the right moment. They understood that sometimes the smallest gestures, the quietest words, could change everything for someone who had been overlooked for so long. The office buzzed with activity, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding in the corner. The employee worked on, trying to stay invisible, while the visitor prepared to make a difference. It was a delicate situation, but the visitor knew that taking action was the right thing to do. And in that moment, a sense of hope began to grow, not just for the employee, but for the office as a whole. The visitor could no longer just watch. The employee's quiet courage had left a strong impression, and the unfair treatment could not be ignored. Slowly, with calm confidence, the visitor stepped closer to the group of coworkers who had been mocking and criticizing. The room seemed to notice the change in energy, though most people weren't sure why. There was a calm authority about the visitor, a presence that commanded attention without shouting or raising a voice. The visitor spoke quietly at first, but everyone could hear. They addressed the situation with simple, clear words. "I've been watching how this employee works," the visitor said. "They do their job with dedication and care. They face challenges that many of us cannot imagine, yet they continue to give their best every single day. And yet some of you are treating them unfairly." There was a brief silence. Some coworkers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others exchanged nervous glances. The visitor's words were gentle but firm. They didn't attack anyone personally, but they highlighted the behavior that was wrong. They spoke about respect, kindness, and the importance of supporting one another in a workplace. The employee looked up, startled at first. They hadn't expected anyone to stand up for them. Their eyes filled with disbelief and gratitude. For so long they had felt invisible, as if their efforts didn't matter. And yet, here was someone noticing not just their work, but their courage, their patience, and their humanity, the visitor continued. "Everyone has value and everyone deserves respect," they said. "It doesn't matter if someone is different or if they have challenges that we don't fully understand. What matters is how we treat each other. We all need to create an environment where everyone can thrive, where kindness is the rule, not the exception." The words were simple, but they carried weight. The visitor wasn't just speaking for the employee, they were speaking for fairness, for decency, for something that had been missing in the office for too long. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. People stopped whispering and looking around. They listened. Some of them realized, perhaps for the first time, that their behavior had been hurtful. The employee couldn't believe it. They had never experienced anything like this before. All those moments of ridicule and dismissal, the small cruel jokes, the snide remarks, the unfair criticisms suddenly seemed to melt away in the presence of someone who truly cared. For the first time, they felt seen, respected, and valued. The visitor then turned slightly toward the employee and smiled warmly. "You have done an amazing job here," they said. "I want you to know that your efforts do not go unnoticed. Keep being yourself and keep giving your best. That is all anyone can ask for." Tears welled up in the employee's eyes, not because they were sad, but because of relief and gratitude. They had been carrying the weight of isolation and criticism for so long, and now someone had lifted a little bit of that burden. The support, the acknowledgement, and the simple act of standing up for them meant more than words could describe. The coworkers who had been mocking began to shift uncomfortably. Some looked down at their desks. Others avoided eye contact. It became clear that their behavior had been noticed, and it was no longer acceptable. The visitor's calm yet firm intervention had created a moment of accountability without shaming anyone in a harmful way. Management, who had been observing from a distance, took note as well. They realized that change was needed, not just for the employee, but for the culture of the office. Procedures could be implemented to prevent future mistreatment. But the first step was the recognition that every employee deserves dignity and respect. The employee took a deep breath, feeling a sense of empowerment they had never felt before. They realized that they didn't have to endure cruelty silently. There were people willing to stand up for them, willing to see them for who they truly were. That recognition sparked a new sense of confidence, a feeling that they could continue to grow and succeed without fear of constant ridicule. The visitor, noticing the employee's reaction, smiled again. There was no need for grand gestures. Sometimes a quiet acknowledgement, a voice speaking truth in a respectful way, could change the course of someone's life. And that was exactly what was happening in that office. The moment didn't end with just a few words. The visitor continued to encourage everyone to reflect on their behavior and how they treated others. They emphasized teamwork, empathy, and inclusion. Slowly, the office atmosphere began to shift. People who had been passive or indifferent started paying attention to their actions. Some even approached the employee to apologize or offer support. For the employee, it was overwhelming but beautiful. They realized that things could change, that people could see their effort, and that kindness was possible even in places they had once thought harsh and unforgiving. The visitor had shown them that they were worthy of respect and dignity, and that realization carried a quiet but powerful strength. By the end of the day, the office felt different. The subtle energy of tension and cruelty had lifted, replaced by awareness and a sense of possibility. The employee finished their work, a small smile on their face, knowing that they were no longer invisible. The visitor had not only noticed their courage, but had also acted in a way that empowered them and reminded everyone else that fairness and respect were essential. That day marked a turning point. The employee's life at work would never be the same. The simple act of standing up against injustice had a ripple effect. It reminded everyone that a single person, through compassion and courage, could inspire change. And for the employee, that day became a memory of hope, a moment when someone saw them, believed in them, and made a difference that could last a lifetime. After the visitor spoke up, the office felt different. The air seemed lighter, even though the day was still busy with tasks and deadlines. People were quieter, more thoughtful. The employees who had been unkind suddenly realized the effect of their behavior. They could no longer pretend that their actions were harmless or invisible. There was a sense of accountability in the room, gentle but firm, and it was impossible to ignore. The employee with special needs felt a strange mixture of relief and nervousness. Relief because someone had finally recognized their efforts, and nervousness because they weren't used to receiving support. For so long they had worked in silence, facing criticism alone. Now there was a voice defending them, reminding everyone that they had value, that their efforts mattered, and that no one had the right to belittle them. Management noticed the change too. They realized that the office culture needed adjustment. It wasn't enough to just tell people to be nice. Clear steps had to be taken to ensure fairness and inclusion. Meetings were held to discuss workplace behavior, and policies were reinforced to prevent harassment and mistreatment. It became clear that creating a supportive environment was not just a moral choice, but essential for everyone's productivity and well-being. Some coworkers began to approach the employee cautiously, unsure at first how to behave. A few offered apologies for the past, admitting that they hadn't realized the impact of their words or actions. Others expressed admiration for the employee's patience and dedication. Small gestures of kindness started appearing, smiles, offers of help, and quiet words of encouragement. For the employee, these small gestures were meaningful. Showing that change was possible, the visitor remained in the background, watching the ripple effect of their intervention. They didn't need attention or praise. Their goal was simply to make a difference. Seeing the employee gradually gain confidence and witnessing coworkers rethink their behavior was reward enough. The office, once tense and uncomfortable, began to feel more human and compassionate. The employees started noticing subtle changes in themselves too. They felt lighter at work, less anxious, and more willing to speak up when something felt wrong. They realized that they didn't have to shrink to fit in or hide their abilities. Their work could be recognized, their efforts appreciated, and their voice could matter. That newfound confidence gave them energy to try new tasks and even share ideas in meetings, something they had rarely done before. Colleagues began to see the employee in a new light. They noticed the skill and focus that had always been there, but often overlooked. People began asking for help from the employee, seeking their advice on projects, and valuing their input. The respect that had been missing for so long started to grow naturally. Not because it was demanded, but because it was deserved. The office environment slowly transformed. Gossip and whispers of mockery decreased, replaced by more collaborative and encouraging conversations. The employees' determination inspired others to rethink how they treated people around them. The visitor's quiet intervention had created a ripple effect, one action leading to many positive changes. For the employee, the day-to-day work was still challenging, but the emotional weight had lifted. They no longer feared ridicule or isolation. Instead, they felt supported and valued. That sense of security allowed them to focus on learning and improving rather than merely surviving the workday. Even the coworkers who had once been unkind started to benefit from the change. The office felt more harmonious, productivity improved, and small acts of kindness became more frequent. The visitor's presence had reminded everyone of a simple truth: respect. Empathy and fairness can transform not just one life, but the culture of an entire workplace. By the end of the week, the employees' transformation was noticeable. They walked with more confidence, spoke more openly, and even shared ideas during meetings without hesitation. Colleagues treated them differently, with curiosity and respect instead of judgment or mockery. Management took note of the improvement in morale and teamwork, realizing that supporting every employee was not just right, but smart. The employee began to feel hope for the future, hope that their work could lead to opportunities, recognition, and growth. They understood now that challenges didn't define them, but perseverance, courage, and kindness did. The visitor's intervention had not only defended them, but had opened a door to a better future. The office, once a place of tension, was now a place of small victories, mutual respect, and understanding. Everyone could feel the change in the atmosphere. It wasn't perfect yet. There were still challenges to face, but for the first time, there was a sense of possibility, of growth, and of compassion. The employee knew one thing for sure: they would never forget the day someone noticed them, the day someone chose to act instead of stay silent. It was a turning point that would remain with them forever, a reminder that kindness and courage can make a real difference. Over the next few weeks, the office continued to change in ways that no one could ignore. The employee with special needs was no longer the quiet, anxious person who just tried to survive each day. Now they were becoming more confident, more assertive, and more involved. Their ideas were being heard, their work respected, and their presence valued. For the first time in a long time, they felt like they truly belonged. The coworkers who had once mocked or ignored them had begun to shift as well. They started noticing the employees' dedication and skill, and many quietly admitted to themselves that they had judged too quickly. Some even came forward to apologize sincerely, showing that people can change when they are reminded of kindness and fairness. Slowly, the office became more collaborative. People began to help each other without judgment, and the culture of subtle cruelty faded. The employees' transformation was inspiring. Their confidence radiated in small ways, speaking up in meetings, offering helpful suggestions, and helping new employees adjust to the office. They were no longer hidden in the background, and their coworkers began to see that their contributions made a real difference. The office itself became a warmer, more inclusive place. All because one person had taken a stand at the right moment. The visitor, who had noticed the injustice weeks earlier, returned briefly to check on the office. They observed the changes with quiet satisfaction. The employee smiled at them, a mix of gratitude and happiness in their eyes. It was clear that the intervention had not just stopped the mistreatment, it had opened doors for growth, respect, and dignity that the employee had never imagined possible. The employee began to dream bigger. They started thinking about new projects they could lead, ways to help others in the office, and even goals outside of work that they had once thought were unreachable. The encouragement and support they received gave them the courage to believe in themselves. Every task completed, every idea shared, became a small victory, reinforcing that they were capable and valued. The positive change in the office didn't just affect the employee. Everyone noticed the atmosphere was lighter, calmer, and more productive. Meetings ran smoother, cooperation improved, and even management saw better results. When people were treated with respect and included, everyone benefited. The ripple effect of one act of standing up against injustice had grown far beyond what anyone, Expected. The employee also discovered the importance of self-respect and advocacy. They learned that it was okay to ask for help, to speak up when treated unfairly, and to recognize their own worth. No longer weighed down by fear or judgment, they were able to fully contribute, not just to their own work, but to the well-being of the entire team. They realized that being different didn't make them less, it made them unique, valuable, and strong. One day, the employee walked into a team meeting, and this time there was a new energy. The coworkers listened respectfully as the employee shared a suggestion to improve a project. The idea was well received, and the team worked together to implement it. That moment, small as it seemed, symbolized the journey the employee had taken. From being ignored and belittled to being respected and heard, the office culture continued to improve. Employees began to watch how they treated each other, offering support instead of criticism. The simple lesson that one person's courage and compassion could inspire change became embedded in the workplace. The employee's story became an example of resilience and the impact of standing up for what is right. Looking back, the employee realized how far they had come. The fear and isolation that once defined their days had been replaced by confidence, respect, and hope. They understood that challenges didn't have to hold them back. With patience, perseverance, and support from the right people, they could overcome obstacles and make a difference in the lives of others as well. The visitor's intervention had shown the power of noticing someone's struggle and acting with kindness. It reminded everyone in the office, and the employee most of all, that standing up against unfairness could change lives. The ripple effect of that action reached beyond just one day, shaping a culture of respect and empathy that would last for years to come. The employee now felt proud of themselves, not only for the work they completed, but for the courage they had shown every day quietly in the face of adversity. Their journey was a testament to strength, resilience, and the fact that kindness and fairness can create real change. They had learned that being different was never a weakness, and that when someone believes in you, it can make the impossible feel possible. In the end, the office had transformed. The employee had grown into a confident, respected, and valued team member. The coworkers had learned to reflect on their behavior and embrace empathy. And the visitor, by refusing to stay silent, had reminded everyone that standing up for what is right could change the world one life, one office, and one act of courage at a time. The story of that employee became more than just a tale of overcoming hardship. It became a lesson about humanity, compassion, and the difference one person can make. The small, quiet acts of courage and kindness had led to a lasting change, creating an environment where respect, dignity, and empathy were no longer optional, they were essential, and for the employee, that change would remain with them forever, a reminder that even in the face of cruelty, there is hope, there is support, and there is a future full of possibilities.